There is a difference between a man who has money and a man who believes his money has answered every question about who he is. The first kind of man walks into a room and tries to make something happen. The second kind walks in and waits for the room to confirm what he already decided before he arrived. The man who sat across from me that afternoon was the second kind. He had decided before he ever set foot in that studio what I was, what this show was, what the people in those seats were. And he had brought all of that deciding with him the same way he brought the Rolex on his wrist, as evidence. Evidence of something he needed you to see. I have been a black man in America for 67 years. I have built something from nothing in this country. I have stood on stages in front of millions of people, and I have learned, over the course of all those years, to read a room. To read a person. To know, within the first 30 seconds of looking at someone, what they have come for. I knew what he had come for before he sat down. But I am also a professional. I have hosted this show for 16 years. I have sat across from difficult people and I have held the line and done my job. Because the people in those seats deserve a show, and the families on that stage deserve their moment, and you do not let one man with a Rolex and a grievance ruin what belongs to everyone else. So I did not say what I should have said at the start. God forgive me for that. Today I am going to tell you 3 things. I am going to tell you who this man was, and what he thought he was walking into. I am going to tell you what he said and what I said back, right there on live television, in front of a studio that went so quiet you could have heard a person breathing in the last row. And I am going to tell you what happened 3 weeks later. Not on camera. Not in front of anyone. Because that is the part of this story that tells you what kind of woman Camille Henderson actually was underneath everything she had learned to hide. Stay with me. Subscribe to this channel right now and turn on that bell. Because if you have ever watched someone treat another human being like a prop, like something to be used and then set aside, then what I am about to tell you is not just about one afternoon in a television studio. It is about something that has been going on in this country for a very long time. Subscribe, then don't move. It was a Friday. Late spring. Los Angeles. My stage manager Darnell, 9 years with me, the kind of man who has seen so much that his face almost never moves, which is exactly why you watch his face. Darnell found me 45 minutes before we taped. He didn't knock the way he usually knocks. He just opened the door and stood in it. He said, "We have a situation with the guest family." He told me the man in the Henderson family, the patriarch, first seat, had spent the pre-show briefing correcting the producer on how to pronounce his name, asking twice whether the studio audience would be that kind of crowd, and telling the wardrobe assistant that the tie she'd suggested made him look like he was going to a cookout. He'd said it with a smile. He'd said everything with a smile. That was Darnell's word. Everything. I asked if the family knew. He said the daughter looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. I told him we'd be fine. He looked at me the way he looks at me when he believes I'm wrong, but has learned that saying so doesn't change anything. Then he left. Lord forgive me. I let it go. When the Henderson family walked out, I saw him immediately. Raymond Henderson, 61 years old. Self-made, which he would tell you before you asked. He'd built a regional logistics company in Charlotte, North Carolina, over 30 years. He wore a charcoal suit cut for him specifically, the kind that does not come off a rack anywhere. He had a Patek Philippe on his left wrist, rose gold, the kind they don't put a price on in the window. He wore it the way certain men wear things, not as decoration, but as argument. His handshake, when he gave it to me, was a full second too long and applied a quarter turn too much pressure. Not aggressive. Worse than aggressive. Calibrating. He was not rude. He was gracious. He told me he was a longtime fan. He smiled at the audience, and the audience smiled back. He put his arm around his daughter and said, "This is my girl," to the camera with the warmth of a man who knows exactly what warmth looks like on television. Not proud. Worse than proud. Performing, his daughter's name was Camille. 28 years old. An emergency room nurse from Charlotte who had taken 3 days off work to be here. She stood beside him, with her shoulders pulled slightly inward, not hunched, not defeated, just braced. The way a person stands when they have spent a lifetime next to something loud and are very good at making themselves small without anyone noticing. Her smile was real. I could tell because it lived only in her eyes and not in the rest of her face, which is the opposite of her father's smile, which lived everywhere except his eyes. Something was wrong. I felt it the way I always feel it, not as a thought, as a shift in the air. Something is real wrong here. But we had a show. 300 people in those seats. A taping schedule. I told myself what I always tell myself. It's not your business, Steve. Do your job. God forgive me. I let it go. We started playing. And Camille Henderson was extraordinary. I want you to understand exactly what I mean by that word. I do not use it lightly. I have hosted this show for 16 years. I have stood across from thousands of contestants. Camille Henderson was one of the quickest minds I have ever watched work in real time on this stage. She did not hesitate. She did not second guess. She hit that buzzer, and she called out answers, and 3 of them were the #1 answer on the board, and the crowd went from polite applause to genuine noise. The kind that rises from the gut of a room rather than the hands of people doing what they came to do. She was magnificent. Sharp as a tack. Absolutely magnificent. And for those few precious minutes, I watched the tension go out of her shoulders. I watched her chin come up. I watched her eyes stop scanning the room for the nearest exit and start looking directly at the board. Directly at me. Directly at the audience. For the first time since she walked out onto that stage, Camille Henderson looked like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The crowd was on their feet for her. Raymond Henderson was on his feet too. "That's my daughter," he told the camera, both arms raised. "That's my daughter right there. You see that? That's what I raised." The smile that covered his whole face. The eyes that were watching not Camille, but the audience watching Camille. Absorbing the reflection. Collecting it. He was not watching his daughter shine. He was watching himself be the father of a daughter who was shining. That is a different thing. It is a very different thing, and if you have been paying attention your whole life, you know the difference the moment you see it. The first thing Raymond said, I almost missed. We were in fast money, and Camille had just scored an answer that put them within 30 points of the win when Raymond leaned toward the nearest camera and said, in a voice just below the noise, not bad for a warm-up act. I caught it on the peripheral. I looked at him. He was still facing the camera, still smiling, as if the words had been said by someone else in another room. Camille had not heard him. Step 1. Under the noise. Deniable, the second thing he said came 15 minutes later, when a ruling went against the family on a disputed answer and Camille turned to me, not angrily, just with the measured confusion of someone with a reasonable question, and Raymond put his hand on her shoulder and said, loudly enough for the first 3 rows, "Don't bother. Sweetheart, you know how these things are run." The family went still. The oldest son looked at the floor. Camille's hand moved to her collarbone the way a hand moves when a person is trying to hold something in. The audience heard it. You could feel the room adjust, the held breath before a person decides how to respond. Not outrage yet, not silence. Something between them. I looked at Raymond Henderson. He looked back at me with the Rolex on his wrist and the smile on his face and said nothing else. Step 2. Visible, in front of witnesses. Still deniable. Before I tell you what he said that ended the show, and I am going to tell you, every word of it, I want you to do one thing. Drop one word in the comments right now. Just one. Tell me what you would have done in that moment. Drop it, and then come right back. Because what happened next is the thing I have never told in this way. The third thing Raymond Henderson said, he said into a microphone, we had reached the final round. The Hendersons were in position to win. I was standing center stage. Raymond was standing center stage. 300 people in those seats. And I asked him how he was feeling. A standard question, the kind I have asked 10,000 times. And Raymond Henderson looked at me. He looked at me the way a man looks at something he has been patient with long enough, and he said, in a clear voice that carried to every corner of that studio, I'm feeling like I've been very patient watching a black clown run a game show. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Dead silence, the kind of silence that fills a room the way water fills a room, from the floor up, where 300 people arrive at the same understanding at the same instant, and the understanding is so large that there is no sound left for any of it. Camille's hand came up to her mouth. The oldest son took one step backward. One step, like the word had a physical weight, and he needed to get out from under it. The floor director, Patrice, 22 years in television production, I have never once seen her lose her composure, set her clipboard down on the floor. Carefully, and did not pick it back up. Raymond Henderson stood where he was and waited. The Rolex caught the studio light. 10 seconds. I know because I have watched the tape. I want to be honest with you about what moved through me in those 10 seconds. The first thing I felt was familiar. Not surprise, not shock. Familiar, the way you recognize a smell from a house you grew up in. I have been a black man in America for 67 years. I knew that feeling. And a part of me, the part that has been in this business for 40 years, the part that has a drawer full of sentences that can dismantle a man in public in less time than it takes to say them, that part was already loaded. Already knew exactly what a public evisceration of Raymond Henderson would sound like. But I have also lived long enough to know what that path costs. I have watched men take it. I have watched the fire feel like justice and become the story. I have watched the man who hit back become the headline and the clip run for years, while the person who provoked him was long forgotten. My mother was not a woman who raised her voice. Ever, but I heard her say, at the kitchen table in Cleveland, when I was 9 years old and had come home with my fists still tight from something that had happened at school, I heard her say, "Baby, the world has enough loud. What it is always, always short of, is a man who knows when to be still." She said it once. She said it quietly. I have carried it for 58 years. Then I looked at Camille. She was standing with her hand still at her mouth and her eyes on me, not on her father, on me, and in them was something I recognized. Not fear, not even anger, something older than both of those things. The look of a woman who has sat at that table her whole life, who has learned to make herself small and hold her breath and wait for the moment to pass, who has never once, in 28 years, had someone look back. She was the most important person in that room. I made a decision. I did not raise my voice. I did not point. I did not perform for the room. I did not look at the cameras. I looked at Raymond Henderson, and I took 3 steps toward him. Slowly, every step deliberate. And I stopped at a distance that was close and measured and chosen. Close enough that what I said was between him and me and the microphone. Far enough that the choice not to be in his space was visible to everyone watching. I looked at him for a moment without speaking, the kind of look that is not a performance, the kind that is simply the face of a man who has decided he understands what is in front of him. And then I said, in a voice that did not waver, "Sir, this show is over. Go home." 6 words. Delivered the way my mother used to say things at the kitchen table. Quietly, with absolute completeness. I did not wait for his response. I set the microphone down the way you set something down when you are finished with it permanently. Then I turned away from Raymond Henderson. I did not watch him process it. I did not look to see his face. I walked to Camille. I got low, knee on the stage floor, eye level with this woman who had driven to this studio and taken 3 days of Pito and stood on this stage and been brilliant and had not broken, had not given him the reaction he had always gotten. I took her hand in both of mine. I said quietly, "You were magnificent out there. Every answer. Every second. That was yours, and nobody can take it. You hear me? Not 1 second of it belongs to him. It belongs to you. Only you." She looked at me. Her eyes filled. She did not cry. She nodded once, slowly the way a person nods when they have been waiting to hear something for a very long time, and the hearing of it is almost too much to receive all at once. 300 people. The kind of silence a room holds when something true has just been said at the exact right moment. Not the silence before something happens. The silence after. The silence that is not waiting for anything else, because what already happened was enough. Then someone in the back stood up. Then someone else. Then the whole room. Not for me. For Camille. If you are still with me, share this video with 1 person right now. 1 person. Someone who needs to know that a moment of dignity in public can change what a person believes is possible in private. 1 share. Then come back. Because what happened 3 weeks after that taping is the reason I decided to tell this story at all. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning, an envelope arrived at the studio addressed to me by hand. No return address. Charlotte, North Carolina postmark. Inside was a single piece of paper, folded once. Not letterhead. Plain white paper, the kind from a printer at home. Camille had written 12 sentences. I counted them. She wrote that she had spent 28 years believing that what happened in that studio was what she deserved. Not the word her father said about me. She knew that was wrong. But the dynamic. The standing beside him. The shrinking. The waiting for it to pass. She wrote that she had believed it for so long that she had stopped being able to see it as a choice. It had just become the weather. She wrote that watching me set the microphone down. Not throw it, not drop it, just set it down, and walk toward her had done something to her that she did not have language for yet. She wrote, "I have never seen a person choose calmly before. I didn't know that was possible. I think I am going to have to learn to do that." She wrote that she had started seeing a therapist. Weekly, she had told her mother, who had cried on the phone for a long time. She had not spoken to her father. She did not say whether she would. She signed it with her first name only. As for Raymond Henderson, I did not end his company. I want you to hear me say that clearly. I said 6 words on a stage and went back to my life. What happened to Raymond Henderson after that afternoon came from within Raymond Henderson. The production assistant he had spoken to during check-in filed a formal complaint with HR that same day. 2 others added theirs by the end of the week. Those things have a way of compounding in the same way that water finds its own level. I am not responsible for where Raymond Henderson is today. I said 6 words on a stage. That is all I did. What I know is this. Camille Henderson is still an emergency room nurse in Charlotte, North Carolina. A second letter arrived 6 months later. Her colleagues said something about her had changed, not dramatically, not overnight. But she had started speaking in meetings, started taking up space in rooms, started asking for things she had always been owed and never requested. Her hands don't shake anymore. So let me come back to where I started. There is a difference between a man who has money and a man who believes his money has answered every question about who he is. Raymond Henderson had the Rolex, and the suit, and the company, and the handshake. He had all of the evidence, and none of it, not one piece of it, had answered the question underneath all of it. The question of whether he was enough without the proof. The question that certain people spend their entire lives paying for things to answer. And it never does. That is not a comfortable truth. But it is the only one that makes sense of what he did that day. There are Camilles everywhere. Daughters, sisters, women who learned early to make themselves small so that something larger could be comfortable. They are sitting in waiting rooms and driving to work and standing in studios and making themselves invisible in rooms where they are the most brilliant person present. You know them. You might be one. Do not be the person who stands in the room and says nothing. Do not be the person who almost helped. Be the person who gets low. Be the person who says it belongs to you and no one else. That quiet, insistent, inconvenient feeling you get when you are watching something wrong happen in front of you. Trust it. Act on it. Because the people who carry it and act on it are the people that a Camille Henderson writes a letter about afterward. If this story stayed with you, if even one moment of it told you something true, do 3 things before you close this out. Subscribe to this channel. Because every week we find these stories, the ones that happened in studios and parking lots and quiet rooms, and we tell them the way they deserve to be told, with every detail, because the details are where the truth lives. Share this video with one person you love. Not for me. For every Camille who has been standing in rooms like that one her whole life, waiting for someone to set down the microphone and walk toward her. And drop a heart in the comments for Camille. Because she started speaking in meetings. Because her hands don't shake anymore. Because somewhere tonight she is walking into a 12-hour shift in a trauma bay and she is taking up every inch of space she has earned. God bless Camille Henderson. God bless every person who has ever been made to feel small in a room they were brilliant enough to fill. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. I'll see you in the next one.